We have seen children as young as 18 months with trichotillomania, which is the hair pulling disorder. We have seen a preschooler as young as 3 with full-blown OCD. And we apply the same principle in treatment.
Dr. Yip, explain to me the difference between someone with mild OCD and severe OCD.
So OCD occurs on a spectrum from those people who don't care about anything, who wouldn't have OCD, to those people who are completely debilitated by the rules and the things that they have to do, the compulsions that they have to do because of the obsessional fears. There's any range in between, as long as there are 4 components to be diagnosed with OCD, that you have the obsessions, the intrusive thoughts and sensations that are uncontrollable that you do not want, the compulsive behaviors, these are the safety mechanism, the escape behaviors that you engage in to help yourself feel safe, and it has to take up a lot of time in a day, at least 1 hour. But that's still a lot of time if you're doing it, obsessing, engaging in compulsive behaviors. And then if it interferes with your daily functioning, whether it's school, work, social activities, family activities. So if you have 4 of those components, you have OCD. Then the question is, how much does it interfere with your daily functioning? How much time does it take from your daily activities? And there can be people who engage in obsessions and compulsions for at least an hour a day, to those people who are stuck in obsessions and compulsions for all of their waking moments.
Wow. The people who just have the obsessions, those thoughts, those intrusive thoughts, they don't have OCD because they're not doing the compulsions, because they don't. No, I'm wrong. Okay.
No. There's actually a term. It's called pure O, which stands O, which stands for pure obsessional. It's actually a misnomer because what we don't see are the mental compulsions that the person is engaged in. So we see, or the person understands the obsessions that they're experiencing. However, with the fears that they have, they're engaging in a lot of mental compulsions. If you can imagine like a philosopher, right? What does a philosopher want to do? The fear is not getting at the truth.
Then they want to figure out the truth?
Figure out the truth.
Okay.
And that is what a person with pure O engages in. They have whatever that fear is, okay? Let's say the fear that the world is not really round. And they engage in mental compulsions, whether it's thinking of a conversation that they've had with their peers and their colleagues, or they're thinking of an article that they read, or thinking back of a thought that they might have had. They're constantly intellectualizing. They're constantly repeating certain thoughts. They're constantly trying to get at the truth. They're trying to get at certainty. And remember, OCD is the disease of the doubt. And the reality is, in life, there is no certainty. However, a person with OCD is trying to obtain certainty that doesn't exist.
So is it possible, though, that someone just has the thought and not the compulsion?
It's really rare because the compulsion is also any type of escape or safety behaviors, right? So even a person with pure O, what they would do is they might seek reassurance from other people. They might seek reassurance from their family members. They might seek reassurance from the internet with all that information on the internet these days. They might avoid the situation that triggers the fear or the uncertainty.
So let's just say I got really mad at my landlord and I thought, you know what, I am going to burn this place down because I'm just so angry. Now, I'm not going to do that, but I had the thought. But obviously, that doesn't mean I have OCD.
No.
But what was my compulsion in that scenario?
So a person with OCD would have the thought and think, oh my goodness, what does that mean about me? Why would I have such a thought? Why would anyone have such a horrible thought? Am I a criminal? I must be a criminal if I'm going to have these thoughts. And then they would fear acting out the thought. So there's a term called thought-action fusion, which is when a person believes that having a thought is going to lead to an action, and they tie the two together.
I get it now.
And you have to remember, a thought is a thought is a thought is a thought. It's just that. Just because you have a thought doesn't necessarily mean that you're going to act out a thought, right? How many times have we had thoughts of beating up our bosses?
Of course.
Or
I mean, not here at MedCircle. I've never thought that. I just want to be very clear.
Sure.
Yeah.
Or you know, kicking the ticket meter's butt.
Right. Yeah.
For giving me that ticket.
Yeah.
Just because you have the thought doesn't necessarily mean that you're going to act out on the thought.
Got it.
However, a person with OCD would believe that having a thought means they're going to act out the thought. And what a horrible thing that would be if I did that thing.
In the series we did with Dr. Ramani on anxiety, she really dove deep into how just changing our thought process can help relieve a lot of this anxious behavior. And it's interesting, I'm hearing this as saying, yes, changing our thought process could change this behavior too, but also understanding that they are only thoughts.
Yes.
Is such a powerful thing to understand.
Absolutely.
For people who know someone with OCD or have OCD themselves.
And you know, I think that with people with OCD and anxiety disorders, it has to go beyond just the cognitive therapy part. And the reason why being is people with OCD and anxiety, they realize that their fears are irrational. They realize that it's excessive to be washing 8 hours a day. However, they can't help it.
Right.
Because just because they have the intellectual understanding doesn't translate to an emotional belief.
Yes.
And therefore, the behavior therapy part, and this is, cognitive behavior therapy, the behavior therapy part is the more important component for treatment, because the behavior therapy is what you do to confront the fears that give you the feedback, oh, this actually isn't so threatening.
Nothing happened.
Right?
Nothing bad happened. Yeah.
If you like psychology and learning about mental health and want to learn more while meeting other people who are interested, explore your membership options using the link below this video or visit medcircle.com.
The big question, what causes this?
Well, we don't have any exact science that
I know, it's
tells
mental
us.
health. That's always the answer, but I gotta ask the question.
We know that there's a combination of genetics and the environment. So from our studies, we know that serotonin is one of the neurotransmitters that are involved with OCD. And what happens is that the neurochemical serotonin that transmit messages from different parts of your brain gets blocked. And when that happens, your brain goes into an alarm mode. So your body's fight or flight response gets triggered. And you're constantly surveilling your environment for potential dangers that occur. So we definitely know that serotonin plays a part in OCD, and genetics have a part in that. However, there are also other possibilities that could cause OCD. So for example, there is something called PANS or PANDAS. I don't know if you've heard of it.
I have not.
So PANDAS is the pediatric autoimmune neuropsychiatric disorder associated with strep. And
With strep?
Strep, yes. Dr. Susan Sweeto discovered this, where there's a group of, and this usually occurs to children, where there's a group of children who would have overnight symptoms. Parents will say that they were fine one day, and then the next day they're a complete different child.
Overnight symptoms of OCD?
Yes.
Okay.
And the trigger is the strep virus that crosses the blood-brain barrier. And what it does is the person's immune system starts attacking parts of the brain rather than attacking the strep infection itself. And we know that there are possibility of other diseases, other infections that could cause the same thing. So, for example, the flu virus have been known to do the same thing. Lyme disease, meningitis have been known to do the same thing. So these are environmental factors that could cause OCD. Now, you can take two people who both have a genetic predisposition to OCD. Just because you have the predisposition doesn't necessarily mean that you will actually have OCD.
Right.
So there is a genetic component, and then there are also environmental stressors that will trigger the onset of those genes.
In the MedCircle series with Dr. Arrett, we talked about PTSD. Much of that discussion was focused around the fight or flight response.
Yes.
So I'm curious to get your opinion on if you see people with PTSD having a large occurrence of OCD as well.
Well, there's definitely a comorbidity between PTSD and OCD. Do we have research that shows one triggers the other or vice versa? No, we don't have any conclusive research that shows that. However, we do know that OCD is comorbid with a number of psychiatric conditions. PTSD is one of them, anorexia is another, ADHD. So there is a huge comorbidity of OCD with other conditions. And in fact, it's rare that I have seen a patient at the Renewed Freedom Center with just OCD. Most people coming in with OCD and very severe OCD also have either an OC spectrum disorder, so whether it's trichotillomania, body dysmorphic disorder, skin picking, or they come in also with another anxiety disorder, social anxiety, separation anxiety, phobia, panic attacks.
Wow. The OCD can be diagnosed at any age.
It can be diagnosed at any age. We can see OCD from preschoolers to people in their 60s and 70s. There are two common periods, though, where OCD most often occurs. And one is during the puberty age between 10 and 12, and another is in the early adult years, late adolescent, early adult years, in the late teens, early 20s. Regardless, we have seen children as young as 18 months with trichotillomania, which is the hair pulling disorder. We have seen a preschooler as young as 3 with full-blown OCD. And we apply the same principle in treatment when working.
But when you say full-blown OCD, what does that mean?
Full-blown OCD meaning there are significant compulsive behaviors that take up a lot of time in a day, where the child is very disturbed by the thoughts, and it causes a lot of anxiety and disruptive behaviors. It can cause a lot of tantrums, because you have to understand, children don't really understand what's going on with their bodies.
Right.
They don't know what anxiety is.
Right.
They don't know why they have the thoughts that they do. And therefore, the experience itself is very, very daunting.
Yes.
And they can get into full emotional meltdowns. They can be throwing temper tantrums. And this is another reason why OCD is so often misdiagnosed. It's because we see the external behaviors. So for example, I once had a kid he was probably 8 at the time, and he was found on top of his parents' car, jumping on his parents' car, screaming bloody murder of how I hate you, I want to kill you, I want to smash your head in, because he was angry. However, this kid was misdiagnosed with oppositional defiant disorder rather than obsessive compulsive disorder. And what a lot of clinicians don't do is they don't try to understand the underlying reason. Why were you jumping on your parents' car? Why were you screaming bloody murder? All they do is they look at the external behaviors and go, oh, this must be ADHD. This must be oppositional defiant disorder. And, I want to help people understand, if you had a loved one missing, right? If you can imagine a loved one missing, what is it that you'd be doing? Would you be able to sit still and read a paper? Would you be able to sit still and attend to the lecture that your teacher is giving? No. You would be ruminating about all of the horrific things that might have happened to your loved one, right? Well, that is no different than a person who is experiencing intrusive obsessive thought.
That is the example.
Yes.
That people are going to get what this is. And I told you at the beginning of this interview before we started filming, I said, to be honest, Dr. Yep, I don't really fully understand this.
Right.
And I do that on purpose because I want to come in here and get educated just like so many people are watching. But that I now get.
Right.
Why someone would be banging on a car.
Yes.
Or doing anything they could to have one moment of temporary relief.
Yes, absolutely. So if that actually happened, right, and you have a loved one missing, and the person is let's say this is a child, and the child was supposed to be home at 4 p.m. and now it's midnight and the child is nowhere to be found, what would a parent do? What would anybody do at this point?
Panic, call,
Panic.
Get in their car, yeah,
exactly.
everything, right?
You'd be panicking, you'd be calling people, you'd be hacking into their social media, right?
Yep.
Maybe they were doing something that they didn't tell you. However, all of these behaviors are safety behaviors. All of these behaviors serve to give you some sort of hope, some sort of relief. As you're picking up that phone and you're calling the person's friend, you're hoping, oh, you might get some answer. And then as soon as you don't get the answer, that intense anxiety comes right back, right? And the anxiety doesn't go away. It just stays until you get some certainty of that loved one, right? Those are the compulsive safety behaviors a person with OCD would be experiencing. So why would a person be able to sit still? Why would a person be able to pay attention? Yet, do you know how many kids are misdiagnosed as having ADHD when they actually have OCD? We have so many children and adults who come to our treatment center and they have been misdiagnosed for so many years. And they have been going to regular talk therapy, insight-oriented therapy, which does have a place, however, not in OCD or anxiety disorders.
And you can't get the right treatment until you get the right diagnosis.
That's right.
That's why this is so important, but also so frustrating. I'm thinking of all the parents watching this going, this is fine, but how do I know if my kid is acting out, if they have HDHD, if they're just depressed, or if they have OCD?
Right.
I mean, what do you tell those parents?
Well, first of all, you want to recognize some signs. So if your loved one is stuck repeating certain behaviors, if your loved one...
Give an example, though. Give me an example in like an adolescent teen or a child even younger.
Okay. Examples: going in and out of doors, getting up and down off of chairs, turning the stoves on and off, checking faucets, washing to the point where their hands are bloody and dry and chapped and cracked, constantly asking for reassurance, for certainty. Is this okay for me to touch? Is this knife okay to use? Is my food contaminated? Will I be hurt if I go to school? If they have a hard time sleeping because they are so stuck in their obsessive thoughts that they can't sleep because your body's natural fight or flight response is heightened. If they are the last to get out of the house in the morning because they are stuck performing compulsive behaviors and they're simply late. They'd rather be late than to not engage in their compulsive behaviors. Have they started to avoid friends, avoid school, avoid things that they used to enjoy because of fear of embarrassment or because they fear that they will get stuck in the ritual while they are in public? Are they more irritable? Because again, your brain is like a plate. If your plate is full of negative thoughts, then you're not going to have space or tolerance for anything else. So are they more frustrated and irritable? So those are just some of the signs that parents and loved ones can recognize. And if they do, then they need to seek help. Whether it's finding an OCD support group, finding an expert who can treat the person. Parents can always go on the International OCD Foundation website, which is iocdf.org. There is a therapist directory of experts who can treat OCD. There is also the Anxiety and Depression Association of America, which is adaa.org, that also has a therapist directory, and as well the abct.org, which is the Advancement of Behavioral and Cognitive Therapy.
Okay, well, in our next episode, we're going to get into how you actually diagnose OCD. And then later in this series, we'll talk about the treatments. Is there anything left in terms of the causes or the signs that you really think would be beneficial for people to know that we haven't already covered?
I think we've covered a lot of them. I want family members to understand that part of their goal is to also be a part of treatment. So treatment doesn't just involve the individual. Family members, because they are so entrenched in the sufferer's compulsions or the sufferer's behaviors and avoidances, that they also need to be a part of treatment. And they have to learn how to be supportive without enabling OCD, without worsening it.